Last part of our conference, and this is really to say thank you to everybody, to have our award ceremony. But before we start off with that, first of all, I would like to introduce or invite Professor Wang. Professor Jafari has asked him just to come to the stage to reflect on the fruitful discussions that we had over the past 3 days that really happened between the industry and academia. And I think if I look back at the conference, the goal of this conference was really to bring the industry and the academia together. And I think there was a lot of fruitful discussions that took place. We had good panel sessions, we had good parallel sessions. So I'm going to hand over to Professor Wang, Associate Dean from the Rosen College of Hospitality Management. I think he's my boss, one of my bosses, from the University of Central Florida. Professor Wang, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everybody. It's amazing that, at the end of the conference, we still have a full house. So that is usually not happening in a lot of other conferences I attended. So thank you very much for staying longer and to bring a successful closure to the conference. Well, let me talk a little bit about the original discussions related to the conference. I think 2 years ago, we invited Professor Jafari and Eduardo to attend one of the conferences we organized at Rosen College. And the conference is called the Second World Research Summit in Hospitality and Tourism, Crossing the Bridges, all right? So the intention of the conference is really based on an understanding that, yes, there's a gap between academia and industry. There's a gap related to the application of knowledge generated by the academic community. There's a problem related to the different languages we speak or we write or we communicate with each other. Because when you look at the research activities conducted by research community, if you add all the journals in the area of hospitality, tourism, leisure, and sports, right? So I can safely say probably there are about 200 journals, right, available worldwide, all right? But the question is that, how many of those information, how many of those journals actually are read by the practitioners, and how much information is actually consumed by the practice, by the field? So I think, there's a big question mark related to that. So that was kind of beginning start of the discussion for a type of a forum which can hopefully provide a platform for facilitating the communication and the dialogue between academia and industry. And then, of course, we also discussed a lot of other issues related to, whether theory should, inform practice or vice versa, or, practice informs theory. I still remember the conversations I had with Professor Jafari, and based on his observation, a lot of other industry sectors, for example, medical field and engineering and so on and so forth, right? It's always the case that, theory leads practice, right? But in our field, I think it's a little bit different because, we are working in a very, very applied field. So I believe the process should be a co-production process. Yes, on the one hand, theory informs practice, but on the other hand, practice also provides feedbacks to theory development, okay? So if you look at, for example, all the keynote speakers, panel discussions, and paper presentations, and so on and so forth, there's a really wide range of topics discussed, ranging from, different areas. But I think, from my understanding, probably there are 4 major areas I would like to highlight, reflected by the following 4 keywords. I think the first keyword is knowledge, So this is a conference about knowledge, right? Knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination and so on and so forth. And the second keyword, I think, is about transfer, right? So that is the major theme of the conference, as you may all know, the transfer of knowledge, between the academia and industry. And the third keyword, I think, again and again, in a lot of the presentations, which is reflected, is innovation. We need to think differently. We need to conduct business differently. We need to come up with new ideas, new ways of doing business. So I think that is a major theme coming out of the conference. Last but not least, that leads to the final panel discussion, that is excellence. Why we are here? We are here for striving to excellence. Okay, so I think in terms of arrangement of the conference, from knowledge to transfer to innovation, and then all these drive to excellence. So I think that is a perfect arrangement. I'm not sure whether it's by accident or the committee actually thought really about it very, very carefully, following a logical format. So during the conference, we have 2 keynote speakers. We have 7 panel discussions. I thought there was 6 panel discussions, but last minute somebody told me that no, we have another one, which was a really, really excellent one. Thank you very much for all the panelists. And we have 16 parallel sessions, right, covering 33 presentations based on my count. Okay, so if we say that the theme of the conference is for knowledge transfer, the theme of the conference is to create dialogues and discussions or even debates about innovation and about excellence. I think, for the most part, we have achieved the goal, right? Because, all these things, all these issues have been discussed during the conference. I would like to, just have some reflections based on some of the discussions. So hopefully, this will provide more reflections about, what we do after the conference, because we have to have something to take away out of this conference. And of course, as I mentioned, that there are a lot of ideas, topics, which have been discussed, debated, presented at the conference. So it is not possible for me to exhaust all the topics I follow. So if I do not mention anybody's presentation, please forgive me. But I do, take a lot of notes. I was trying to be a good student here and trying to learn and trying to communicate with other people. So, I would like to start with some general remarks about the keynote speakers. So the first keynote speaker, Intelligence for Futures, offered by Professor Fayaz Salah. I think, the keynote speech really makes us to think about the future directions for growth, okay, and also for productivity. Because a lot of times we argue, and also we believe that growth is based on resources, traditional type of resources, whether it is financial resources, whether it's human resources, or sometimes it is social capital related resources, right? But I think one important message I took out of their presentation is that we cannot afford to compete and to grow, to produce based on traditional resources, because all those resources are limited. And the future way of competing, the future way of increasing the productivity has to be based on innovation, different kinds of innovation. So we have to really think about from an innovative paradigm perspective. And under that, we need to manage different aspects of innovation. For example, the policies, the resources need to be put together to create innovative projects and to produce innovative products. So I think that is one of the reflections I have related to the first keynote speech. But also that also makes me to think that, because a lot of times when people talk about innovation, and then automatically they refer to technology. Yes, there's a direct relationship between innovation and technology, but from the talk. I believe that this is also everybody's consensus that technology does not equal to innovation. Technology can be part of innovation, but it's not the complete parcel of innovation. Innovation means something more and deeper and wider. It usually means, for example, more widespread technological and organizational change. Okay, so I think that is I believe is a very, very important message. The second keynote speech, really, the title of the keynote speech, of course, just for reflecting your memory, Transfer of Knowledge as a Key Instrument for the Tourism Industry, provided by Professor Simon Hudson from University of South Carolina. So that speech really demonstrates that academic research centers can be a great tool to the industry in terms of the applied aspect. And the more, this is a very, very important message, so I just jot down one of the slides. The more we can highlight such initiatives, the more likely we are to change the perception that academic research seldom influences the real-world practice. Okay, because that is usually for a long time the perception of industry, right? You guys are speaking, English while we are speaking Italian. We are not speaking the same language, right? Or we are not engaged in the same type of communication protocol, right? So I think, the theory into practice, the TIP model, I think that is a very, very powerful statement. I hope that, if we can do that, of course, that is everybody's wish, that is everybody's aspiration in the future. That is some of the reflections I would like to mention regarding the keynote speakers. And then, of course, we have a lot of panel discussions. For the sake of time, I will not go over probably each of them. I will just highlight some of the important aspects. From the panel discussion number 1, I think 3 keywords really come into my mind, right? Those are connectivity, networking, and sharing. Because if you look at the competitive base of a lot of economies, US, Europe, and so on and so forth, right? Competition is really based on the clustering of economies, right? So if you look at Milan, if you look at, for example, Orlando as a tourism destination, it's concentration of a lot of tourism businesses, right? So I think that should be the mindset for future competition: connectivity, networking, and sharing, all right? Now, panel number 2, powering tourism with sustainable energy. And obviously, this is a very, very important topic because, energy is usually in the heart of innovation, okay? And energy efficiency is at least a means to sustainability. Of course, we understand that sustainability means a lot of other things, right? But energy efficiency is one of the most important factors leading to sustainability. So there are a lot of initiatives throughout the world to achieve that goal. For example, in Orlando, we in the past 2 years, we have been involved in a project which is called the GDO, Green Destination Orlando. So the intention is to create the first worldwide urban green destination, to come up with the measures and indicators so that industry people know how to define a green destination. If you say your destination is green, but how do you measure that? How can you tell that your destination is green, and so on and so forth, right? The third panel discussion, new distribution channels. Probably this is one of my favorite topics. Part of the reason is that I also do some research in this area. Distribution channel, as everybody understands, is pretty much revolution in the last 20 years. Okay, if you think about web-based technology, since the first introduction of the browser, okay, which is the interface between the content and the user, is right? So the first browser was invented in 1993, if I'm not correct, right? At the University of Illinois. At that time, of course, I was a PhD student at the university, so I was very familiar. And then later on, that led to very mainstream search engines, browsers, for example. For example, the Netscape, for example, the Internet Explorer. Right now, you have different kinds of versions, right? So, in a nutshell, I think when you talk about distribution channels, my feeling is that yes, we have gone through a lot in the last 20 years. Basically, we follow 3 stages, right? The first stage, what I call is the intermediation. We do everything through the travel agents, tour operators, and so on and so forth, right? And then suddenly, in the 1990s and 2000, right, the technology came. And because of the technology innovation, because of the consumers' direct access to the suppliers' information and suppliers' products, and then a lot of them were driven out of the business. That is the process we described as the disintermediation. However, those travel agents, tour operators, they learned their lessons, okay? They embraced technology, they came back and become competitive. So that's why we have so many OTAs right now who are doing very, very good business, is right? So if you say that in the last 20 years, we have achieved this much, okay? Can you imagine, for example, in the next 20 years, where we are going to be, right? So I cannot predict that. I don't want to predict that because, sometimes, it gives me kind of gloomy pictures of, humankind. Maybe the humankind or the look, we have will change in the future. In the future, maybe we just need to use our head, right? Our head is becoming bigger and bigger, and then, our arms and the legs will become smaller and smaller, right? Because we don't need to have them or use them, okay? So there's a lot of, discussion about this area, technology-driven, competitive advantage. But I think, another very important message from this is that, it's really not about technology itself, which creates, competitive advantage, right? It's about how technology enable organizations to create competitive advantage. What is important is not really about the technology itself. What is important is about who uses technology for what purposes and how the technology is used. Okay, so I think that is another very important message. At least I took out of the panel discussion. Panel 4 and 5 and 6 great information, but just for the sake of time, I will not go over with them one by one. Right? The last panel discussion we just heard. Right? You heard the keywords, right? So it is about differentiation. It is about branding, right? It is about storytelling. And then I think, another keyword, which I think is very important, is consistency, okay? Consistency, right? And sometimes, the way I feel is that, we don't have to talk about really grand, great things, right? We need to focus on the detailed aspect, okay? There's a saying which says that the devil is in the details, right? So that is how you need, we as an industry, as a community of researchers or industry professionals, right? We have to work together to really push for that excellence and strive for that excellence, okay? So, of course, this is just a conference, 2-day conference. Yes, we have achieved a lot, right? But this is not the end of the discussion. I believe that, to a certain extent, this is really the beginning of new discussions, the beginning of new directions, right? And if you are not satisfied with the information presented, if you want to have more of this type of conferences, right? Just for information, in December of 2015 and 16, we have the 3rd World Research Summit in Hospitality and Tourism, which is going to be held by the Rosen College of Hospitality Management, UCF, Orlando, Florida, the city beautiful. 1 week before the Christmas break. I think that will be wonderful if you want to combine your research or learning activities with vacation, right? So with that, I thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the evening and have a safe trip back home wherever you are going. Okay? Thank you.